bought this thicknesser about 2 weeks ago from eBay. Needed to do some work on a table I made just to refine it up a little bit. Normally these thicknesses go for about $580, and I was thinking I had to buy a new one because I couldn't find a good second-hand one, but fortunately this came up on eBay and I managed to pick it up for $300. It's in really good condition. It was 10 minutes away from where I live, so nice and handy, and hopefully it turns out to be a good machine. The boards I'll be working on today are roughly 300mm across, 1.6 metres long and 45mm thick. These were structural Oregon beams from the house I had in Melton when I dismantled the carport. These were the beams left over. I thought they were too good to waste, so I made them into a table, but I didn't quite finish off the top of the table. The boards themselves are a little bit warped, they're pretty rough cut, and I just wanted to thin them down a little bit, make them a little bit smoother, and also to lighten the table, because there's 4 pieces of those, plus the frame, plus the legs, which makes an incredibly heavy table, and it takes 2 people to lift it. After about maybe an hour and a half of running this board through the thicknesser, you can see that it looks a lot cleaner. If you have a look down the side, you can see there is a definite definite difference there. I've probably taken off about 5mm. And the other side of this board, this side was the underside of the table, so it looked exactly the same as that. Now I've gone from that to that, all nice new clean board all the way along. The other side, which did look like this, I've run it through a few times. This board had a fairly big concave bow in it. I've run it through the thicknesser a number of times, still haven't got it, all the old paint all the way off. There's still a little bit sitting there in the middle, but once it's back onto the frame of the table, that won't really matter because you won't see this side. And due to the size, the width and the length of the board, I've had to do it in very small gradual steps, about 0.5mm at a time. So it took a long time. I've still got this board to go, that board, and one more. I'm thinking maybe I might just do the 3 instead of all 4 and narrow down the table a little bit, because with the 4th board it is a fairly sizable table. So if I just have the 3 boards, I think that'll be more than enough to seat 6 people. 4 people definitely, 6 people, yeah, it might be a little bit squashy, but should be alright. Now before I do any more work on the table, just going to do a little bit of a review on this thicknesser. I did buy it secondhand, so I can't really complain. The guy that I bought it off, he looked after it well, but he used it a lot. What I've noticed is the thermal cutout reset switch, there's a small part broken off. I tripped it a couple of times, been a little bit ambitious trying to take a little bit too much off the boards, and therefore tripped the thermal protection. What I did notice was there's a little piece, a threaded piece on this that was broken off, and it was just sitting inside that hole. So every time I pressed it, it had pushed the button in. So I didn't operate it as it looks now. I did make sure it was all still together. I just poked a pencil through, a wooden pencil, reset the thermal circuit breaker just to finish off the board. So I've got to get a new one of these. Second thing is around the back. The dust collector. Yes, you should use some sort of dust extraction system, old vacuum cleaner or something else like that, just to pull all the wood chips and the sawdust away, because it does clog up in this hole. The guy that I bought it off told me, yes, it will be a problem. And I found out a number of times, yes, it was a problem. That's why you see me with the air hose blowing this out every now and again in the earlier part of this video. When I get my 3D printer set up, I'm thinking of cutting this portion out here and putting in a larger port just to clear the dust out without having to use a vacuum or dust extraction system at the moment. But it is poor design. If you see up in here, you can just see this is the roller with the blades. It is fairly wide. The design of the dust extractor basically just pushes all the dust straight onto this part here, doesn't actually funnel it into there, and that's why I would say get a dust extractor, vacuum, whatever, plug it into there, and it should help pull all the wood chips and the sawdust away. But for now, I'll just deal with it and blow it out every now and again with an air hose. Also, the blades. I don't know if it was me or if it's from the previous owner's use, but if you look very carefully, you might be able to see black spots on the blades. I'll try and zoom in a bit. You see right along the edge of the blades there, little black spots. They're burns from just overheating of the blades, I'd say, plus the board that I just machined down probably had about a millimetre of maybe millimetre and a half of varnish and old paint, so that could be an accumulation of burnt varnish and paint. But I can feel around that spot there from about here to about here, not as sharp as what it is on the two edges. So I may look at getting a new set of blades for this rather than get them sharpened. Just be easier to get a new set of blades. Also, another thing I discovered while using the machine, this is your height adjustment, and there is a fair bit of play in it before it actually starts moving the planing head. You probably get about a quarter of a turn out of it before it actually starts moving, and as it's running over a piece of wood, it actually starts to unwind and it raises itself up. Usually around about a quarter of a turn before it actually stops, but by that time your adjustment's gone out and your board is no longer the same thickness all the way along. So I had a look underneath to see if I can do anything about it. As you can see, the height adjustment runs on a shaft down to here, down to a plastic gear, onto another plastic 45-degree angle gear, down a shaft to the other side, and you have another set of 45-degree plastic gears. They are what sets the adjustment. So if I turn the handle, this one is connected to the handle, this shaft and gears are set to run across to the other side and onto the other threaded rod to adjust the other side. If you look very carefully, you'll see there is a minute bit of movement there between the gear and this shaft here. There's also the same amount of movement on this gear and this shaft here, and it would be the same down on these bottom ones here. So those tiny bits of movement from here, here, down to here and to the final gear, that's probably where you're getting the rough quarter of a turn play on the actual adjusting handle itself. I'm going to try and have a look and see if there's a way that I could at least reduce that movement. Maybe this little bracket here, machine it down a little bit to bring the gears, this gear closer to that one, and the same at the bottom here. Machine this little piece here just a fraction of a millimeter, just to bring it a little bit closer to the other gear and hopefully reduce the amount of movement in those gears. And one final thing is this roller here, they're the feed rollers. As you push your wood in, these rollers start to feed the wood through. I have noticed they have been used quite a lot, and on the edge, on the ends of them, they're quite rough, but in the middle they are nice and smooth. So what I might do with that is I might just run a bit of sandpaper over them just to rough them up a little bit, to give them a bit more traction onto the piece of wood. As you can see here, this sticker here basically gives you guidelines of your feeding speed, blade specifications, safety directions, all that sort of thing. But it also tells you your recommended maximum working permissible widths, lengths, and how much you can take off at a time. The minimum planing length is 127 millimeters, 12.7 centimeters. Well, that's fine, we didn't have to worry about that. We were machining 1.6 meter lengths. As you can see here, your maximum planing width, 318 millimeters. This machine isn't designed for industrial use, everyday use, heavy use. It is a home handyman tool. The boards I was using was 300 millimeters, so I was right on the limit of this machine with your planing width. Planing height, it's fine, didn't really have to worry about that. It can go down to 7 millimeters and up to 153 millimeters. Maximum planing depth per pass, 3 millimeters. Now that would be for something fairly narrow, whereas 300 millimeter boards at the most, going all the way across, I could probably go half a millimeter, maybe 3/4 of a millimeter at a time. So I was averaging 1/4 of a turn on the adjustment handle, which I think was roughly about an actual 1/4 of a millimeter when I really started getting across the whole width of the board. So the wider the board is, obviously the less depth you can actually go at any one time. I do have a little bit of work to do on this. Replace the blades, fix the thermal cutout, rough up the rollers, try and get a bit of the slop out of the adjustment here from this machine, but I only paid $300 for it. If I had it bought brand new, 570, blades would have been fine, the rollers would have been fine, the reset switch would have been fine. Don't know about the height adjustment though. I don't know if there would have been a lot of slop in that. Judging by the amount of use that I now think that this has had, I would say it has worn over time, but I don't think it's worn a lot. So if I had bought it brand new, I'd probably still have play in the adjustment. I do have to figure out a way to also stop the movement as I'm running a board through. I'll have to have a look inside, see if there's some way where I can tighten this up or something just to stop it from actually moving when I'm running a board through it. Because if I'm running a board through it, I want it to be the same thickness from one end to the other, not out, a millimeter, possibly. But overall, I can't really complain about the machine. It's doing what I want it to do, even though I'm asking a fair bit due to the size of the boards I'm actually planing down, but I just got to take it a lot slower, and I'll get there eventually. And once I finish doing the other boards, I'll put the table back together and should all be good.